So you have all sources and prompt, but just in case like you run into some issue over the weekend, the first thing that is on Google Classroom, and it says it's an assignment. I just put a due date on it just so folks were aware that, oh yeah, I have this essay coming in on the 20th. It's not that you're submitting anything on Google Classroom, but the synthesis prompt is there, and then all the sources are there. So the sources that you have on the prompt would be the Booker T. Washington would be that Atlanta Compromise speech that we took a look at back in like beginning of February. You have the Du Bois passage from his book of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others. You have the Booker T. Washington statue. I think it says Tuskegee on yours. Yeah, you have everything. You just got the Garvey speech, and you just got the Pittsburgh Proclamation, and then yesterday you got the poem Hughes' I Too Sing America, and you got the Norman Rockwell painting that was on the back of the poem. So if you are missing any sources, no matter what Allie does, she cannot find the Booker T. Washington statue. There is a copy of it online that you could take a look at. Or over the weekend, if you need to plan something, you would have it there. If you want to print it out, you certainly can. But there would be digital copies of everything that we have. All right? Yeah, I passed that out. Like after we did our first reading checklist for Invisible Man. It would have been a while ago.
Maybe that was the day of absence.
Well, it's right there. The one that you might, I'll show it to you right now, that you might look a little bit at more over the weekend would be the Norman Rockwell painting, for the simple fact that it's in color here, whereas the one that you have is a pretty grayed out, grainy representation of it. So a couple things that would jump out with the picture. Number one, the words down at the bottom you can use. So if you end up using the Rockwell source, keep in mind you might be taking a look at this stuff right here and not worry about the picture itself, which you could do. But if you take a look at the picture, you don't really see the tomato that's been thrown as well in yours, because you got a pretty bright red tomato right here. You can see it was thrown at the wall, so the assumption would be thrown at her. And then there's also, in front of the first U.S. Marshal, you can see graffiti where KKK is scrawled in on the wall. And then over here, you can see between the two marshals and where the tomato was thrown, N-word is faintly on the wall as well. So I don't, if those might be things that you want to call attention to in your explanation, I don't know if you would necessarily recognize it or see it as well within the black and white picture that you have. But those things are there. So if you need to look at them over the weekend, they're there. If you're at any of the musical performances this weekend and you don't know what to do at intermission, you can pull up some of those things. I will be at Danes of Midnight. Yep. Be one big family affair. If you talk to my kids, you lose points. If you acknowledge us from afar,
I'm not on stage.
you don't lose anything.
What? Oh.
If your shoe flies off and you're in the ensemble, you might get points if you. No, you don't. You hit me, like 0 on your essay. Don't even bother talking about it. So all sources are there. All right.
Mr. Payne, is the Du Bois source the big packet?
That says Du Bois on it. Yeah, it's the of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others. That's our source.
And then this one, the AP English language is the Atlanta.
Booker T. Washington. Yeah, it's the Atlanta Compromise. So we got a Booker T. Washington speech. We have a Du Bois packet. We have a statue of Booker T. Washington, which is referenced in the book as the founder. You have a poem. You have a painting. You have the Pittsburgh Proclamation, which is a proclamation of basically unionization that's taken in the 1800s. And you have a Marcus Garvey speech, as well as a book. Any other questions about what am I looking at for sources? And again, you can always double check because I got them all listed right there on Google Classroom. All right, looking at the prompt then. On Tuesday, you're going to bring in with you probably your book. You can absolutely bring in the copies of the sources that you're going to be using. You can bring in your prompt sheet. My guess is a lot of you are probably going to outline some stuff on your prompt sheet that you are going to want to use within your essay. What you cannot do is don't write your introduction, don't write your body paragraphs. You can outline what they are going to be, but you're not transcribing, an essay that you wrote Sunday night or Monday night onto Tuesday. For your prompt, the argument that you come up with is going to be supported through Ellison. What does make this synthesis a little bit different, it's an argumentative essay, but you're pulling your argument from Invisible Man. So your argument essentially is, this is what Ellison is trying to get across. So this is not a synthesis essay where you're probably going to be writing about your own personal examples. Your personal examples will basically be your argument that you're pulling from the text. Take a look at the question. I think it'll make a little bit more sense, once we start going over that stuff. So you got your opening aspect, your opening introduction to the prompt. This isn't your prompt, but just kind of giving you an idea of what's going on. So in his letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. writes, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Ellison's novel Invisible Man investigates the injustice brought upon African Americans in both the northern and southern parts of the United States of America during the early to mid 20th century. To combat this injustice, Ellison explores various methods of social and political actions on behalf of African Americans. These actions range from, but are not limited to, instigation, submission, cooperation, education, manipulation, exile. Now you get into the actual prompt part down here. This is what we're answering. You read the sources. Synthesize information from at least 4 of the sources. One of those will be the book. So you're looking at bare minimum the book plus 3 other sources of your choice. But synthesize information from 4 of the sources, incorporate into the essay that argues and examines which course of action, social and or political, that Ellison ultimately supports for African Americans in an unjust United States of America. So the actions that you would be taking a look at would kind of be this stuff that we have up here. Chances are most of you will pick from those 6, but we did leave open the option. You're not limited to these 6. If there's something else that you want to look at, by all means, you can go ahead and do it. So what you have to decide, taking the whole book into consideration, and you start with the book, taking the book into consideration, what does Ellison think the appropriate thing for oppressed people to do would be if you live in an unjust, oppressed environment? You make that decision first, then you start to figure out what the other sources are going to be. So your evidence from Ellison is most likely going to be how you come up with what he feels the appropriate course of action would be. For Ellison, you got that asterisk down at the bottom of the prompt. Oops. You have to give at least 3 quotes that are coming from the book. So you can bring your book along. You can have the pages sticky noted. You might already have the quotes written down on your prompt sheet that you want to incorporate into the essay. Whatever you decide to do is completely up to you. By no means do these have to be big, long passages. We've kind of been doing that blending lately. You folks did a really nice job with your last synthesis essay, where you're taking parts of the phrases and incorporating them into your own writing, so long as you're not quoting them out of context. But you're going to have at least 3 examples coming from Invisible Man that's going to help prove why you believe Ellison thinks instigation is what folks should do, submission, cooperation, education, manipulation, and or exile. If you want to pick something else again that you think there's a better term, by all means you can go ahead and do that. You're not limited to these. Some of you might decide there's actually 2 things that he would be arguing for, and you would have the ability to look at that. I probably wouldn't go beyond 2. I think then you're going to get too disjointed if you do more than 2 things.
What do you mean exactly by instigation?
So, well, it doesn't mean you're starting a fight necessarily, but taking some kind of action, initiating something. I do think when you use the word instigate, it tends to have a negative connotation that you are kind of picking a fight or starting a fight. but you are being more proactive in something as opposed to reactionary to it.
This is the best part. You should start something. It's not saying that something.
Correct. So if, and just like taking examples from the book, if you thought that Ellison was going, Roz is what you should do, you know, you instigate a fight, you pick a fight, you instigate some kind of action, you could use him as being an example. If you thought instigation was more of, I'm going to advocate for myself and simply I'm not going to submit, you could use it in that regards as well. One thing that you could do, and then Jake, we'll get to you. The last essay, a lot of you were churning out paragraphs pretty quickly, in a good way. I don't think it is out of the question for many of you that 3 body paragraphs could be a strong possibility for the essay, especially if you know what the prompt is and you're able to kind of plan it out. If you are pretty confident that you could do 3 body paragraphs, one of those body paragraphs certainly could be a rebuttal where you go, it is not instigation or it is not submission as people might think it is, but this is what it would be. So if you thought that Ellison was trying to make an example out of Roz and no, you shouldn't do something like this, that would be a way in which you could get some evidence. You could use some of the source material, which we'll talk about, and then you could slide into, but this is what he is advocating for. You don't have to do a rebuttal. That's not a requirement. But I think it is a possibility based on the amount that you folks are writing on Tuesday that you would be able to incorporate a 3rd body paragraph. That could be a rebuttal if you want.
So if we choose like 2 of them, we have to explain like which one makes more sense in the fact that like you choose one and not like the other.
Well, if I thought, and I'm picking random stuff. I'm not trying to get you to go in this direction or whatever. You know, cooperation and education. If I thought Ellison was arguing for both of those, I'm not going to be going this one more so than that one or that one more so than cooperation. But those are 2 things that need to happen together. So they would probably each get their own body paragraph, but it's not turning into like a qualification where when it's all said and done, though, you should do this one more or you should do that one. If I'm picking 2, they're probably going to be pretty much of equal value. Now, if I do a rebuttal that goes, you know, some may think it's education, but look at the school that he went to. Clearly, Ellison is mocking it. The statue gets bird poop on it, for goodness sakes. That's not going to work. You need to do something else. That would then be a way where one is better than the other. But if you pick 2 that he's advocating for, I would treat them more as equals than this one's better than that one. Okay.
Do you want us to do a rebuttal?
It's an option. It's not something that I'm trying to make you do.
Like,
So-
will a key example we have a rebuttal?
It's always an option, and I'm not trying to be like hint, wink, wink. You should do one or you should not do one. It's an option that would be there that you can use. If you don't do a rebuttal, it's not that your score is going to be limited to you can't get anything higher than a 6. So you could not. I mean, a rebuttal might not be feasible. You go, I can only get 2 body paragraphs, and I can still get done when I need to. I'm not going to have time for it. Then you don't worry about it. But most of you, not most of you, all of you, are writing more in 40 minutes than you were writing in 40 minutes back in like December. So when a rebuttal might not have been an option before, it is one now. The benefits of doing a rebuttal in general, so not just for like this essay, but anything, from an argumentative standpoint, it's nice to point out why the other side's wrong. You know, not only am I right, but Grace is wrong. And that makes me look more right by showing that Grace is wrong. So if you're doing something like a DRQ, it's good. For a synthesis, it's not a bad way to use sources that you don't agree with, or that you feel that, you know, in this case, Ellison does not agree with. So if you feel good that I can use these 2 sources for my argument, and I have to use the book, I'm not sure what my 4th one could be, it's a good option as to it's a way to kind of incorporate another source. With this book, I think there would be some of those that you would look at and go, no, I don't think that's what Ellison is arguing. The book's about a guy who lives underground. So What's this book about? A guy lives underground. He steals a lot of lights. Oh, so it's good to live underground. Could be a way that some folks would look at it. But I think there could be some question as to Ellison's really saying, Allie, pack your stuff and go underground. So an easy, I don't want to say easy, a way to kind of get going might be some readers would think that Allison is advocating that people should live underground and exit a world that's not going to treat them fairly. But this isn't quite the case in the book because, and it could kind of gain some momentum for what your argument is going to be. But it's not going to be me, there's not going to be an AP reader who is going to hold it against you that you did not write a rebuttal unless it is explicitly stated in a prompt. I've never seen it explicitly stated in a prompt. Did you have a question that came back or no? Okay. Anything else like initially that not sure about? Doesn't mean you know what you're going to write about right now, but anything else that you're looking at as to what are you going to do?
I feel like Justin supports a lot of
Things up there?
he's like, oh, this doesn't work, and this one, and this one, and this also doesn't work. No, that didn't really work either.
There's a lot of trial and error in the book. There's no doubt about
I
that.
guess my question is, would it be okay for me to rebut two arguments and then support one?
Without you having done it yet, so me seeing it, the initial concern would be, is there going to be enough to support your argument if theoretically a third of your argument is support, or 2/3 is no, this part's wrong. I would think you're probably still going to want like at least 2 paragraphs in support of what you're going Allison's trying to do. I do think, and pretty sure I said this to you yesterday, if over the weekend you're not going to reread the whole book, that's not going to happen. Jake could even try, and it's not going to happen. Some people still haven't read the whole book, honestly, is probably in some cases. What I would do, though, is I would take a look at the epilogue. Because I would say that is at least a place where, Byron, I don't know that, the light from above is going to shine on you and all of a sudden, I got it. But the epilogue does certainly give some thought, some philosophical viewpoints about things. The fact that he says my hibernation is over, I think it's time for me to go back up, I would say that means something. But part of it is going to be, well, what do you think that means? There is not a situation where you write instigation and I go, you picked the wrong one. Shame on you. 2. There have certainly been essays, whether it be this one or anything else, where, Noel or you or anyone else picked something that I would not choose. But there's validity to the argument, it's supported, it makes sense, it's a differing viewpoint, it can certainly still do very well. If you were to go, hey, I think it is, something like that, and it seems like you're completely discounting other scenes that happen in the book that might go against it, I might call attention to that one. But you could make a case, effectively, for any of those 6. Doesn't mean I'll agree with it, but I don't have to agree with it. You don't always agree with me. If you hurry, you'll beat 5 seconds. It's been too long.
It how when an apple snapped and it slipped out of my fingers and
It was
boomerang
It
across
was
the
good.
room.
You have a chance. But to your original thing, I would want to make sure the main emphasis of my essay is in support of my argument, as opposed to, well, it's not this one, it's not this one, it's not this one. If you did you did 4-body paragraphs and went, it's not that one, it's not that one, it's not that one, it's not that one. So clearly he's in support of manipulation and exile. You still haven't supported what it is you want to do. I'd have a problem with that one.
One
All right. Lindsay asked critical question. You're asking me what the author wants. Essentially, not counting then source age, how or even why would I use any of this other stuff? Without holding you to it, so I'm not going to write it down and go, okay, this is what it's going to be written on Tuesday. Anyone have any of those 6 or other ideas that you feel like, oh, I think I'm leaning towards, he's suggesting this one? Instigation. Okay. Hypothetically speaking, or theoretically, and Lindsay, I'm not ignoring your original question, what would be some things from the book that would seem to support that maybe Allison thinks that folks should take action?
Are we allowed
We
to
didn't even
bring-
answer the one question yet. You can
Are
ask
we allowed
another
to
question.
bring this in?
Yes.
Are we, like, if I write on some.
You can have brainstorming notes on it, just don't write your essay ahead of time.
Can I write on a line piece of paper instead of this?
Bring the back of that. Bring that.
Wait, the question was why, or why that is?
Yeah.
Because he, right, like, the whole book, Tim isn't just like sitting back, like, he hears the opinions of others, like Bledsoe and Rockwell, like, saying that, like, whites run the world, but he actually wants to go try to make it for himself.
Okay. So he advocates for himself, maybe not all the time, but he at least does things out of his own accord, doesn't always listen to what other folks would do. So he at least tries to do what he wants. One of the first scenes where he really does kind of take action, I would say, is chapter 13. You did a question about it on that study guide that we did for those couple days. Or what's the first time that he really actually does something without truly thinking about it? Eviction speech. Okay. What else? Taking action, instigating, doing something.
Coming out.
At the end. Fine with those two. Anything else anyone wants to throw out?
We talk about
Like throwing the spear?
No, like
Or,
that would be something like that.
oh,
At least Elsa takes a look at it.
Tim does these, but then also the way that Roz advocates. Okay. I don't know if there's someone in here. Someone did spell Roz as like R-A-Z. I was like, okay, they got the sound going. I think it was 9th period. I don't remember who did it. All right. So I got some examples coming from the book. Lindsay, did the light bulb go off yet? Ooh, now I know how I'm going to use my sources based on these 3 things. It's okay to say no. Okay, good. Anyone think of any way that you could use any of the sources that you got? Keep in mind, you haven't had a chance to look at 2 of them. One being the Marcus Garvey speech, the other one being the Pittsburgh Proclamation.
I was gonna put the Marcus Garvey under Ross.
Okay. Garvey and Roz would make sense. Garvey does tend to kind of advocate for something. One way then in which you could use the source would be I'd start off with my Roz example, okay? And it doesn't mean you just go, and Roz is just like Marcus Garvey. Garvey, I used my source. Yay, that's going to be a pretty cheap use of it. But Garvey is one who also advocates action, and then let's say you include a quote from it or a specific example from the source. Ellison clearly seems to be in agreement with this idea because his character Roz does similar things. You could argue that the Ruby Bridges picture would be a person taking action. Yes, there are going to be folks who aren't going to be happy with her choice. There are going to be people who are going to try to stop her. There are going to be people who are going to try to intimidate her. But Ellison doesn't think that that's enough to make a person stop. This is why Tim continues to kind of persevere. what I would suggest doing is starting with what you think your best examples would be from the book, and then where does the source material kind of start to complement it a little bit?
Wait, so for every example that you put, like for all of your examples, they should be based out of the book, and you have to match each example with a source.
You do not have to match each example with a source. So your first part, yes, I want to base my argument from things coming from the book because it is asking you what is it that Allison wants to do.
Yeah.
And that's a non-synthesis type stuff for us. I'm taking a synthesis and kind of like an analytical essay and I'm squashing them together. So if you don't like the prompt, it's my fault. But I don't care. So rather than when you would normally be putting in your own 2 cents for an argument, basically Allison is replacing you. Okay? Your argument is choosing what you think Allison is trying to do.
Okay, so we're
So
choosing examples from the book, and then we're using the sources kind of to reinforce it.
to complement and reinforce them. So let's say that, this whole re-entering of society thing, I don't really see a source that's going to go along with that. That's perfectly fine. You don't have to have one for it. It wouldn't surprise me if if someone were to write 3-body paragraphs and someone has a source in each one and they have an Ellison quote in each one, because that makes it easy for me to remember to do what it is I need to do. But just like Alec was asking, do I have to do a rebuttal? You don't have to set it up that way. Some of you are so pragmatic and you're so math-oriented and science-oriented that everything has to be symmetrical, and you'll grow up to be Mrs. Kane. That's fine. Some of you are going to be like me. That would be unfortunate. That's why you just said, oh crap.
No, I just remembered
Don't worry, I don't think you're going to grow up to be like me. Where it's not going to bother you if things aren't all exactly the same. And you can have 2 sources and 2 quotes in a paragraph. Ooh, why would you want to do something like that?
I was gonna add another thing to the institution.
Okay.
Could you also use Du Bois?
Sure. Because he is a more assertive person
In
with
his conflict with Washington.
with his conflict. And if I were to, because, Du Bois is doing more of you have to be proactive. You can't just simply stand back and wait for people to help you. They're not going to help you. If I were to include something like Du Bois, a possibility also would be, all right, what's the opposite of taking action?
Inaction.
Submission. So I could do a rebuttal paragraph where Ellison does not think submission is an appropriate thing to do. Case in point, when is Tim most submissive? Probably go at school, or even to get to school where you're going to give me a scholarship, I'm going to get punched in the mouth. Hey, sure, no problem. By the way, what's his graduation speech? Pass down your bucket, Atlanta Compromise. I could make reference that clearly Ellison is not in favor of submission. There's no reason why a person should face physical and mental degradation just to get to school. If there is any doubt that he's not in favor of it, look at what he uses as his graduation speech. Then you could quote the graduation speech or part of it, which would use pass down your bucket. If there was any confusion that he's not in favor of Booker T. Washington's ideas, he has bird poop on him. Look at the statue at the school. Hey, what do you know? I got a picture of the statue. That's another source. So you could knock out multiple sources in close proximity. Theoretically, you could go Du Bois, Washington statue. You got 3 sources out of the way in close proximity to one another.
Is Ellison going to count as source, or do we have to use it?
Ellison is one of your 4 sources that you have to use him. So it's
I mean,
Ellison
man.
plus 3 others.
Okay.
But we won't hear your question. Are you recording this? But Ali asked it,
I just
Good.
just in case anyone wondered. I might be too far away. It could just sound like Alvin Cook right now. Hi. So, Lindsay, to your original thing, it's not that, okay, I need to see where that source is being referenced in the book, but you can use the sources as a way to affirm that other people agree with these, that they make sense, or you could also use the sources to affirm that no, these are terrible ideas, that Ellison wants no part of. But your essay is going to get built around this source first. I would figure out what am I going to pull from Ellison, then figure out which sources are best going to complement it. I don't think you want to go into it as to, ooh, I like pictures. That's a short poem. Got them. Those are my 3 sources, and then see what works. Now, honestly, you could use all 3 of those sources and be perfectly fine, but I think you want to know from the book what you want to use before you kind of start figuring it out. If you're writing, and our bell rings at 42. So the second bell rings, that's at 36, I think. You got 6 minutes. You're at that decision, body paragraph, conclusion. Body paragraph, conclusion. 10 out of 10 times I'm going body paragraph. If your conclusion ends up being like a tacked on sentence to a body paragraph, so be it. You're probably gaining more by adding that body paragraph than you are by having a beautiful conclusion that has a nice little closure statement at the very end. You earn more through doing a body paragraph. You're not really going to lose anything by omitting a conclusion. Yes, it's nice to have it, and I'd still try to have a concluding, thought with it. But if I can get that body paragraph at the expense of a conclusion, I'm going to do that. Whether I still need to get source material in or not, that's going to give me a better chance to enhance the quality of the overall essay. Not me going, Allie, write a rebuttal no matter what. If you have 2 minutes left, you're not really going to get a good body paragraph in. But if you do have the time, you're going to be better off with that body paragraph than just writing a conclusion. So you can bring the prompt. You can have stuff written with the prompt. You can bring in the sources that you want. Obviously, you have the book with you. You might already have your page numbers written down. That's fine. You might have them sticky tabbed within the book. That's fine. All of those things are options that you can do. You're staying away from line paper just because that opens up Pandora's box. And, you're not going to have whole paragraphs written out, but you can absolutely outline what you plan on using. You could have first body paragraph, quote, source, second body paragraph, quote, source, so on and so forth. I have no problems with that whatsoever. Good news is this is probably the last synthesis you'll write this year.
Yay.
Except for the one.
Except for that, one that counts. Like, do I give you an essay? Your final exam is an essay. I don't know if we'll be starting it before or after your exam.
Why don't you just
Yeah.
Be around the same time.
So technically, we just have to take
Monday, you're going to get Slaughterhouse 5, next book / last book, speaking of last stuff. So Monday, we're looking at Slaughterhouse 5. If you have questions about, hey, will this work, you're going to want to just talk to me, before or after or some point during the day about synthesis essay, because you're not really going to be able to do that on
Okay.
I think I gave my last 2 away. Rebecca, you got 2 Band-Aids from me last week, so if I don't have any, it's her fault.
Okay.